Have you ever had something taken from you by your own family just because they assumed you wouldn't say anything? I wasn't even supposed to see the email. It was CC'd to me by mistake, buried between payroll and a Thanksgiving potluck sign-up. That's how I found out I'd received a $57,000 bonus, and how my mom used the entire thing to pay the deposit for my sister's wedding without asking. "You weren't using it for anything urgent," she said. "I'd paid their electric bills for 3 years, covered prescriptions, even replaced their heater last winter, but this time I got a lawyer. I didn't ask for the money back, I asked for respect. I chose boundaries over silence. And when I sat across from them, my mother, father, and sister, I read every line item I'd paid. No one spoke. I revoked every shared account, every legal authorization. Walked out not in anger, but in clarity. If you've ever been treated like the strong one who'll just keep giving, watch this. You might realize it's time to choose yourself, too. Before we dive into the story, I'd love to get to know you a little better. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. That way, I can send you a special shout-out. Now let's begin our story together. I wasn't even supposed to see the email. It was CC'd to me by mistake, tucked between a payroll confirmation and a Thanksgiving potluck sign-up sheet. I clicked on it out of habit, half expecting some automated HR message. Instead, it congratulated select employees for exceptional contributions this fiscal year. There, 5 names down, was mine. Natalie Quinn, $57,000. My breath hitched. I blinked, then read it again. The figure didn't change. Outside, light snow curled along the window panes, blurring the skyline of downtown Minneapolis. The condo I'd bought 5 years ago with scraped-together savings and a decent credit score felt a little brighter. I imagined new flooring, maybe finally ditching the folding chairs for a real dining set. But mostly, I imagined handing over a down payment for something bigger, something that felt like a next chapter. I printed out a brochure from a first-time homebuyer development not far from Lake Nokomis and slid it into my tote bag, a small act hopeful but cautious. I had time, or so I thought. The Sunday before Thanksgiving, I drove to my parents' house in Eden Prairie. The usual glow of too many holiday lights blinked along their roofline, Rudolph glowing on the lawn like he ran the electric bill. Inside, the scent of cinnamon pine cones mingled with lemon floor polish. Mom's style hadn't changed since I was 12, suburban cozy with a side of overkill. "Nat!" Mom's voice floated in from the kitchen. "You made it just in time for Melissa's big reveal." I hung up my coat, boots squeaking on the tile. My sister stood by the fireplace in a white wool coat, cheeks flushed. She grinned, eyes darting to our mother, then down to the floor. "I found the venue," she said. "It's perfect. Waterfront views, string quartet, heated garden pavilion." "Wow," I managed, taking the mug of cider Dad handed me without looking me in the eye. "That sounds high-end." "It is," Mom chimed in, stirring gravy with the confidence of a woman who believed homemade meals fixed most things. "But worth every penny. We already paid the deposit." I paused. "You did?" Mom glanced at me like I'd missed a memo. "Yes, honey. It made the most sense. We used your bonus." The world tilted slightly. "My what?" "Your bonus. From work. It was just sitting there and the deposit was time-sensitive. Melissa needed to lock it in. It's not like you were using it for anything urgent." I stood there, fingers tightening around the ceramic mug. "You used my bonus?" I asked, voice low. Mom barely flinched. "Sweetheart, it's a family decision. We've always supported each other. Melissa's wedding is important to all of us." I turned to Melissa, whose smile was now thin and shaky. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Dad coughed into his napkin. My jaw ached from holding back the words I wanted to hurl across the room. Instead, I let silence stretch thin and sharp between us. "You know," I said, setting the mug down on the coffee table, "I joked once that if I ever got a serious bonus, I'd buy you a cake topper." Melissa let out a tiny laugh, but it died quickly. Well, enjoy the venue, I added, reaching for my purse. That's the last thing I'm paying for. Dear friend, what would you do if you were in my shoes? I bet you can't guess what's coming next. But before we go any further, drop a 5 in the comments if you're still with me, because what happens next might just leave you speechless. I turned before they could answer. Behind me, the fireplace crackled, and someone cleared their throat. I didn't look back. Outside, the snow had thickened into soft flakes drifting across the driveway. I sat in the car for a moment, letting the heat kick in while the windshield defrosted. The brochure I'd printed earlier peeked out from my tote bag. I pulled it halfway out, then folded it shut and slid it deeper in, unread. At home, the lemon bar I had brought, homemade with a shortbread crust and a dusting of powdered sugar, sat untouched in its glass container. I placed it on the counter, then pushed it to the back, behind a row of tea boxes I hadn't opened in months. My phone buzzed once. Mom, probably. I didn't check. Instead, I pulled a blanket over my lap and stared at the brochure still half sticking out of the tote. A small corner of it curled up like it had second thoughts. In the quiet, I replayed Mom's words. It's not like you were using it for anything urgent. Maybe she was right. Maybe dreaming wasn't urgent, but it mattered. And now it had been spent, without permission, without acknowledgement, without care. And just like that, something shifted. They didn't apologize. They rationalized. That was the part that really stayed with me, like a sour aftertaste you can't quite rinse out. It had been 3 days since the dinner, and not one of them had called to say sorry. Not for taking the money, not for assuming I'd be fine with it, just justifications. It's for family. You always said you'd help, Mom had texted back when I confronted her the next morning. No hello, no remorse, just that same tone she used when she reminded me to wear a scarf in winter. I was sitting at my desk when the message came in. The office was quiet, filtered sunlight pushing through the frosted glass of our 23rd floor workspace in downtown Minneapolis. My screen still showed a spreadsheet, but I hadn't keyed in a number in at least 10 minutes. I read the message twice, thumb frozen above the reply button. I ended up typing just 4 words. You should have asked me. Then came Melissa's voice memo. She hadn't called, of course not, but she sent a recording. Her voice was trembly like she'd just finished crying, but wanted to make sure I knew she hadn't stopped entirely. I didn't ask them, she said. I swear. I didn't know until after. Please don't ruin this for me, Nat. You know how much this wedding means. Please. She paused before the last please, like it would carry more weight if it landed by itself. I didn't reply. I didn't trust myself to. Instead, I grabbed my coat and headed downstairs to meet Jamie for coffee. She'd texted earlier. Loring roast. 5 o'clock. You need espresso. And maybe a lawyer. I found her already seated by the window. 2 cappuccinos waiting, the foam heart still intact. Cinnamon hung in the air, mixing with the warm hum of indie jazz and clinking mugs. The world outside was dipped in early winter. Bare branches, slow pedestrians, snowflakes lazy in their descent. So, Jamie said, stirring her drink, what's the damage? I slid my phone across the table. Screen open to the HR email and my mother's follow-up message. She scanned it with narrowed eyes. Then she set the phone down and looked at me like I'd just told her I'd been mugged in broad daylight. Girl, she said, that's theft. No sugarcoating it. That is actual, legal, don't pass go level theft. I gave a dry laugh, tugging my scarf looser. They say it's for family. Jamie leaned back. Funny how for family always seems to mean from the one who doesn't complain. She had her own history. A brother who used her as a co-signer and defaulted. A mother who still sent her credit card bills like they were postcards. Jamie knew the language of betrayal dressed up in kinship. What are you gonna do? She asked gently. I shook my head. I don't know yet. I deleted the auto payment for their electric bill this morning. First time I haven't paid it in 3 years. Jamie raised her cappuccino in a mock toast. Small steps. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a napkin. Scribbled in her quick, angular handwriting was a name and number. Lucas Myers, personal finance law, mutual contact, she said, then added with a knowing grin, also Melissa's ex. That made me freeze. Wait, seriously? Dated him for like 6 months in college. Brooding, smart. Now works out of Edina. Specializes in financial restitution. The idea planted itself quickly. I hadn't seen Lucas since Melissa's college graduation. He'd been quiet, polite, and far too serious for our loud, champagne-drenched family. Melissa had called him boring with spreadsheets. I looked him up later that night. He wasn't boring. His law firm's site was simple but sharp. Blues and whites, client testimonials, and a quiet authority in the way the copy was worded, advocating for financial clarity and justice. I stared at the schedule consultation button, hovered over it, then clicked. Nothing exploded, no one called. It just prompted me to fill out a form. I typed my name, email, a quick summary, unauthorized use of bonus income by family members without consent, approximately $57,000. Before hitting submit, I paused. My reflection in the screen stared back, tired, a little angry, and, if I'm honest, kind of scared. But I clicked again, this time for real. Later, I walked home instead of driving. My tote bag was heavy, not with groceries, but with 2 years' worth of bank statements, utility payment receipts, and the folded condo brochure I still hadn't let myself throw away. The snow was soft underfoot, blanketing the sidewalks like everything was starting over. Maybe it was. And as I turned onto my block, the words from college floated back, Dad saying, "We never worry about you, Nat. You always have it together." Maybe that's why they thought they could take, because I'd always been the one who didn't fall apart, but I wasn't going to make that mistake again. Lucas didn't flinch when he saw me. That made it worse. I'd spent the walk rehearsing every possible reaction he might have. Surprise, awkwardness, maybe even a half smile for old time's sake. But when the receptionist called out, "Ms. Quinn," and he stepped into the lobby, it was like I was just another client. His face didn't betray even a flicker of recognition. I followed him down the hall, suddenly aware of every sound my boots made on the polished wood floor. His office was nothing like the cramped cubicles or sterile conference rooms I was used to. Exposed brick walls, tall windows, a worn leather sofa by the door. The place had character, but in a quiet, precise way. It reminded me of him, well-ordered, a little distant, impossible to read. "Thank you for coming in," he said, gesturing for me to sit. His voice hadn't changed, calm, even. "What can I help you with today?" I took a breath. "You probably don't remember me." "I do," he said. "Thanksgiving, 2017, apple pie. You hated the crust." I blinked. It was soggy. He smiled slightly, then turned serious again. "You're here for a legal consultation." "Yes." I reached into my tote and pulled out the folder I'd spent the weekend organizing. Printed emails, annotated bank statements, tax records, even screenshots from my company portal. I laid it out on the table between us like evidence in a trial. My parents took my bonus, $57,000, without asking. Said it was for my sister's wedding. I only found out because I was accidentally CC'd on an HR email Lucas didn't interrupt. He let me walk through it all. The conversation at dinner, the texts afterward, the voice memo from Melissa, even the old electric bills I'd been covering since Dad retired early. He asked questions, but gently. His pen moved steadily across a yellow legal pad. When I finally stopped, the silence in the room felt heavier than before. Lucas looked at the documents again, then up at me. "This isn't dramatic," he said. "It's financial misappropriation." The words landed harder than I expected. "I'm not trying to blow this up," I said. I need space. Protection, maybe. I don't know yet if I want to go nuclear." "There are options short of litigation," he replied. "You can formally revoke any authorizations tied to your accounts. I can draft a letter, firm but non-confrontational, that sets a boundary." I nodded slowly. "I want that." He pulled up a template on his screen. "We'll also want to document any prior permissions or recurring transactions. Have you granted them access through any apps or autopay setups? I took out my phone and showed him the utility app. I was covering their electric. It just felt easier than arguing about it. Lucas gave a tight nod. Revoke it today. I tapped through the settings, hands shaking slightly, and deleted the auto payment. The confirmation banner popped up like a final goodbye. He slid a signature form across the desk. This gives me permission to act on your behalf regarding any financial authorizations. I signed. The pen felt heavier than it should have. Lucas began composing the letter. His keystrokes were confident, practiced. I glanced around the office, noticing a small framed photo on the shelf. His law school graduation, him standing beside an older woman in a red scarf. I wondered if she was his mother, if they still talked. When he was done, he turned the screen toward me. It's direct, not aggressive, but it leaves no room for confusion. I read through it. The tone was clean, professional, unmistakably final. He printed it, signed it, and folded it into an envelope with a fluid, deliberate motion. Are you sure you want this kind of fallout? I looked at him. His face was unreadable again, but his eyes, they held something. Not pity, not judgment, just clarity. They already made their choice, I said. I'm just making mine. He nodded once, sealed the envelope, and wrote the names on the front. To Margaret and Thomas Quinn. I stared at the ink. My parents' names. Somehow they looked different in that handwriting, less like family, more like defendants. As I stood to leave, I paused at the doorway. The bracelet on my wrist, silver with a small aquamarine charm, caught the light. It had been a birthday gift from Mom years ago. I unclasped it slowly and placed it in the small ceramic dish by his trash bin. It fell in with a quiet clink. Lucas didn't ask. I didn't explain. Outside, the wind had picked up. Leaves scraped across the sidewalk like whispers I couldn't quite catch. I pulled my coat tighter and walked toward the corner, unsure if the shaking in my hands was from the cold or something else entirely. They didn't call. They sent back a one-line text. Are you serious? No greeting. No punctuation outside that sterile question mark. Just 3 words that felt less like confusion and more like disdain. 3 words that twisted like cold wind through a cracked window. Something meant to be ignored, but impossible to unfeel. It had been 3 days since Lucas mailed the letter. I hadn't expected warmth, but I'd imagined, foolishly, something resembling humanity. Some flicker of acknowledgement. Instead, they chose distance. Weaponized silence with a splash of disbelief. I stared at the screen until it dimmed. Then I locked my phone and set it face down on the kitchen counter like it had cursed. April had come softly to Minneapolis. Pink dogwoods bloomed along the boulevard, fragile and fearless against the wind. I'd started walking longer lately. No earbuds, no calls, just my boots on dry pavement and the rhythmic tapping of loose branches against fences. The city was waking up from winter, but I felt heavier, like my coat was stitched with the weight of 12 months of misplaced trust. I passed Tartine Bakery on the corner of 14th and Emerson. A chalkboard out front said, "Lemon bars are back." Melissa's favorite. Always had been. She and I used to share one every spring, right as the snow melted, perched on a park bench with powdered sugar dusting our sleeves like early pollen. It had been a ritual, a small bond we hadn't managed to destroy. Until now. I walked in, bought one out of reflex, and tucked it into my bag beside a stack of newly notarized paperwork. That night, at 2:12 a.m., Melissa sent a voice memo. Her voice trembled. Nat, I didn't know what they were doing, okay? I didn't ask them. You know I didn't. But what's done is done, and this is supposed to be my time, my wedding, my chance to start fresh. Please don't ruin it. I let it play once, didn't save it, didn't reply. By morning, Lucas forwarded an email. The subject line was a lazy copy-paste. Letter, dated April 3rd. The body? 1 sentence. We didn't realize this was legal. No signature, no explanation. Just as hollow as the text I'd received. Lucas added his own note beneath it. Let's talk. I spent the rest of that morning at my dining table, clicking through every account where their names still lingered. Backup contacts, emergency authorizations, insurance designations. I removed Margaret Quinn from my medical file, added Jamie instead. She didn't know I did that. I just trusted her to show up if it ever mattered. Trust, I realized, didn't have to be loud. Sometimes it was just quiet reliability. At Lucas's office that afternoon, the receptionist looked up and asked, "Ms. Quinn," with a slight pause. It startled me how much hearing my name made me flinch. I nodded. "Yes, Natalie." Lucas met me without fanfare, his expression neutral. "We didn't mention Melissa. We didn't have to." "I take it you saw their response," he said, tapping the paperclip icon on his screen. I nodded, pulling out my folder of receipts and printouts. "They think this is just a phase." "They think you'll fold," he said, leaning back. "They've trained you to." I let that sit between us. There was no anger in his voice, just recognition. The quiet ones really did see everything. "I remember returning a $10 bill once," I said, surprising even myself with the story. "I was 15. A cashier gave me too much change and I walked all the way back in the snow to return it. My mom just shook her head and said, 'You're too honest for your own good.'" Lucas smiled faintly. "And now they're surprised you drew a line?" "They never believed I would." He began typing again, updating the formal documentation. We talked through next steps, nothing aggressive yet, just legal clarity, official boundaries, financial detachment that meant something more than just numbers. Melissa's second voice memo came later that evening, less tearful, sharper. "You're blowing this up. Do you even care how this affects the rest of us? I'm stuck in the middle. I didn't ask to be. But you're making it worse. For everyone." I sat on my bed and listened twice before I responded. "I didn't ruin anything," I said quietly. "You just never asked who was paying." No filter, no re-record. I hit send. The next morning, I opened the lemon bar from Tartine. Powdered sugar still clung to the wax paper like it hadn't moved since yesterday. I took a bite. It tasted exactly the same. Too much memory in one square inch of dessert. I threw it in the trash, barely halfway through. Not because it was bad, but because it hadn't changed. Lucas's final message arrived mid-afternoon. Subject, FYI, Quinn's retained counsel. No greeting, no closing, just an attached scan from a family law firm in St. Paul. They weren't backing down, but neither was I. They didn't want a conversation. They wanted control. That thought anchored itself deep as I stepped into the conference room, the air inside too still for a place meant to resolve conflict. There were cookies on a tray, untouched, 3 glasses of water, sweating slightly. Outside, rain tapped steadily against the windows like it was trying to get in. Lucas nodded at me, professional as ever, then gestured to the seat beside him. I sat, folder in hand, fingers tight around its spine. Across the table, my parents looked calm. Melissa looked like she'd been crying, but her makeup was perfect. That always amazed me about her, how she could fall apart but never fully come undone. Karen, the mediator, began with a neutral tone. "We're here today to discuss a non-litigious separation of finances and roles. In light of recent events, everyone is encouraged to speak respectfully." Margaret smiled faintly. "Let's not make this messy." My father added, "This has all gotten out of hand. Natalie, honey, we never expected you to cut ties." Melissa nodded, hands clasped in her lap. "We're still family." Lucas waited until the room had settled. "Ms. Quinn would like to formally outline the history of financial obligations she's assumed for the family. This is not a lawsuit. It's a detachment." I opened the folder and slid it forward. Inside were 2 years' worth of paper. Venmo screenshots, mortgage transfers, pharmacy co-pays, even the receipt for the heater I had replaced in their house last January. Silent proof of every time I said nothing, but paid everything. Margaret didn't touch the papers. "This is unnecessary." It's history, I said. Yours and mine. Thomas shifted uncomfortably. It was never about the money. We just thought, given your situation, you'd understand. You mean because I don't ask for help? My voice was steady, which surprised me. Melissa finally spoke. You always resented me. Don't pretend you didn't. I turned my gaze to her. I resented being expected to fix everything. Margaret stiffened. Blood doesn't ask for permission. It assumes loyalty. I laughed, not out of amusement. Exactly. You didn't just take my money. You decided it was yours before asking. The silence cracked there. Lucas leaned forward. To be clear, Natalie is here today to revoke all shared authorizations, formal and informal, regarding financial obligations, health directives, and any assets shared in name or implication. Karen glanced around. Does anyone object to formalizing this process? No one answered. No one needed to. Melissa's voice broke the stillness again. You got the career. You got out. I just wanted a moment that felt like mine. And you got the wedding, I said softly. I got the receipts. Karen, the mediator, cleared her throat. I understand this is personal, but we're here for clarity. Everyone has had a chance to speak. I'd like to confirm. Does anyone object to formalizing financial detachment? Again, no one spoke. I thought about all the holidays I helped plan, the surprise birthday dinners I paid deposits for, the quiet envelopes slid across tables with the unspoken weight of just this once. They never asked, only assumed. The silence now felt like the most honest thing they'd offered me in years. Lucas tapped his pen once. Next steps. Removal from all joint forms, dissolution of any shared financial tools, and a full cease of co-payment agreements. He paused, then looked at my mother. This includes health proxy rights. Margaret bristled. You're removing us from that too? Yes, I answered. I'm 30. If I end up in a hospital bed, I need someone who doesn't see my independence as inconvenient. Melissa sniffled. You're punishing all of us because of Mom and Dad's mistake. I shook my head. No, Melissa, I'm choosing not to fund my own erasure. Karen stood. Thank you all for your presence. Lucas and I will coordinate signatures. I closed my folder without bothering to neaten the pages. The damage wasn't in the documents. It was in what came before. As we rose, Margaret looked me in the eye and said, You'll regret doing this. I regret not doing it sooner. Lucas held the door for me but didn't speak. Only once we stepped into the hallway did he say quietly, You handled that with more grace than most people would. I wasn't looking for grace, I said. Just closure. We stopped at the elevator. I didn't press the button. I'll take the stairs, I said. And with that, I turned and walked away. Tired, sore, but lighter, somehow. Outside, the streets shimmered like possibility. I didn't go to the wedding, but I saw the photos. They showed up one by one, like postcards from a life I'd been written out of. Soft blush tones, a vineyard bathed in sunset gold, smiling faces caught mid-toast, mid-laughter, faces I used to know as well as my own. Melissa looked radiant, I'll give her that. Her dress hugged her like a promise. Margaret's makeup was perfect, her lavender shawl draped just so. Even Dad managed to look comfortable in his too-stiff suit, the same one I helped him pick out for a fundraiser years ago. I didn't comment, didn't click like, just looked. Then closed the app and turned my phone face down. That Saturday, while they toasted and danced and smiled into 100 borrowed moments, I stayed home. My new condo was quieter than I expected and more alive than I ever imagined it could be. The floors were wooden and imperfect, creaking softly in the corners. My plants thrived near the window, finally a place with just enough light. I had a reading chair that was mine, not handed down or borrowed. I made tea, read a chapter of a book I wasn't rushing to finish, and let the silence fill the room like music I chose. Monday brought the envelope. No return address. My name printed in black ink, cold and sterile. Inside, a single sheet of paper. No salutation, no signature, just a bulleted list of pending expenses from the wedding, a revised total for florals, an upgrade to the string quartet, the final invoice from the vineyard, and at the bottom, a balance due. It wasn't a request. It was an assumption. I set the paper on the kitchen counter and stared at it for a long time. It didn't make me cry. It didn't even surprise me. It confirmed, again, what Lucas had helped me put into words. This was never about money. It was about permission, ownership, control. I took the envelope to the balcony, where my grandmother's old ceramic pot still held dried lavender. I emptied the contents into the dish, struck a match, and watched the paper curl and blacken at the edges. The total burned last, numbers twisting into smoke before vanishing altogether. There was something final in that moment, not dramatic, just quiet. That afternoon, Lucas called. "It's official," he said. "The final filings are in. You're clear, financially, legally, everything separated." I closed my eyes. "Thank you," I said, "for all of it." There was a pause, then a shift in his tone. "Listen," he added, "I was going to grab coffee this week. No firm talk, no paperwork, just coffee. You interested?" We met at a small cafe tucked between a bookstore and a vintage clothing shop. Nothing flashy, just wooden chairs, warm light, the smell of cinnamon and espresso in the air. He was already there when I arrived, sleeves rolled up, reading something on his phone. When he looked up, he smiled, not the kind people give out of obligation, but the kind that says, "I see you." I sat across from him and took a sip of my drink before speaking. We talked about anything but family, movies we pretended to hate but secretly loved, the strange comfort of overcast days, the fact that neither of us really liked lemon in tea, despite ordering it for years out of habit. Halfway through, he asked, "Do you regret it? Walking away?" I didn't answer right away. I watched a couple outside walk their dog past the cafe window. The woman laughed, tossing her head back like nothing in the world could touch her. I envied that a little. "I don't regret the distance," I said finally. "I regret how long I thought I didn't have a choice." Lucas nodded, fingers tracing the rim of his cup. "They lost more than money." "I know," I said, "but they haven't realized it yet." When we said goodbye, he didn't offer a hug or ask to meet again, just smiled and said, "Take care, Nat." And that was enough. On the way home, I passed Tartine's. The bakery windows were fogged up, the smell of sugar and butter spilling into the street. Inside, lemon bars lined the case, perfect rectangles dusted with powdered sugar. I stepped in, ordered one, and didn't hesitate when the cashier asked if I wanted it to go. I sat on the bench outside, peeled back the paper, and took a bite. This time, I didn't stop halfway through. I didn't think about old birthdays or shared kitchens or the voice that used to say, "Save one for your sister." I didn't feel bitterness or longing or guilt, just flavor. Just now. Sometimes freedom doesn't feel like a parade. It feels like silence and a key that only you have. Sometimes healing doesn't come with fireworks. It arrives quietly in the small act of choosing yourself. Watching their perfect day unfold from a distance, I didn't feel left out. I felt free. Family isn't about blood. It's about respect, about recognizing each other as equals, not resources. I used to believe loyalty meant staying no matter what. Now I know it means knowing when to walk away too. If this story reminds you of something you've lived through, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Sometimes just saying it out loud can make all the difference. And if this story spoke to you and you believe in quiet victories, personal growth, and stories that matter, make sure to subscribe to the channel. There's so much more ahead, and I'd be honored to share it with you.